Okay, well, welcome once again to Teacher Talk. We are starting on Daniel chapter 2 today. Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2 presents us with a very interesting little passage. As we're going to see in just a minute, Daniel, through no fault of his own, is going to find himself in a seemingly impossible situation with a death sentence hanging over his head. Now, how did it get to this point? Well, it involves God and a dream and a cranky, stressed out king. In fact, everyone in this chapter is going to be under some pretty intense pressure, and that's what we're going to look at in today's Bible study lesson. Faith under pressure and the God of the impossible. So Daniel chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled, and he couldn't sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. And when they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, "I have had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means." Then the astrologers answered the king in Aramaic, "O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream. We will interpret it." Now, have you ever had a dream so vivid, so real that you wake up startled or sweating or your heart's pounding? Or I've had dreams where I woke up crying, where I woke up and smelled something burning because something was burning in my dream. Dreams can do that. Nebuchadnezzar had one of those dreams, but it came with a little twist. It was totally God-given, and it shook the king to his very core. God has been known to disturb the odd person's sleep from time to time, but always at an opportune time. Now, we'll examine the dream next week, but in brief, Nebuchadnezzar saw a great and impressive statue that was smashed to pieces by a stone, and that stone became a great mountain that filled the whole earth. Now, this had the king totally freaked out. Was the statue a representation of him? Was it his kingdom? When's it going to be smashed? You can imagine the questions and the thoughts that swirled in his head. He's got all the power. He's got all the wealth of the then known world, but death is a great leveler. And faced with the pressure of his possible death, the king demands answers, and nothing else matters. Job contains an interesting word on this. Job 33, verses 14 through 18 said, "For God does speak, now one way, now another, though man may not perceive it. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls on men as they slumber in their beds, he may speak in their ears and terrify them with warnings, to turn man from wrongdoing and keep him from pride, to preserve his soul from the pit, his life from perishing by the sword." Well, Nebuchadnezzar was terrified with warnings, all right. So he summons his wise men. Now, these were men who called on demons, who looked at the stars, who cast spells, who, would tell the future. These were all demonic ways of interpreting dreams and to give advice to the king. It was just basically a bunch of, spiritists and New Agers. And the only ones not asked to consult were Bible believers. Seems like things haven't changed. Same thing today. Nobody goes to Christians to explain things. They always go to the fortune tellers and the psychics and the astrologers and all of them. But this grisly bunch of wise men are pretty confident, and they say, "O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it." Now, like most mediums and clairvoyants, they're probably thinking they can just be clever and make up some vague, waffly answer and get away with it, but the king's got other ideas. Now, you thought you were grumpy in the mornings. Listen to this. Verses 5 through 9 says, "The king replied to the astrologers, 'This is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I'll have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me." Once more they replied, "Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will interpret it." Then the king answered, "I am certain that you are trying to gain time, because you realize that this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there's just one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change. So then, tell me the dream, and I will know you can interpret it for me." Basically, he's saying, if I can't trust you to tell me what I already know, how can I trust you to tell me what I don't know? He's not ready to play their little games, but he's grumpy. He's very grumpy. Obviously likes to get a good night's sleep. I do too. And when I don't get my sleep, I get grumpy. And if the wise men can't tell him both the dream and the interpretation, they're going to be cut into pieces and their houses are going to be turned into piles of rubble. Nice. Now, on the plus side, if they can state both the dream and the interpretation, all manner of rewards and honor will be theirs. So quite literally, life and death stood before everybody involved. Now, the foundation of all men was now to be tested. If they knew God and they were given revelation, they would live. If their so-called wisdom was based on a lie or a false hope, they would die. So in a similar way, all of mankind stands there now, and all will be ultimately tested. Where is your hope? What is your foundation? Is it in the true God? So when the king dictating such extreme outcomes, it is good to ask why he would do this. On a natural level, he's probably sick of wise men that just make it up as they go along. They improvise. He's probably sick of their greasy advice that just tells him what he wants to hear. Nobody wants to make him mad. But on a more spiritual level, again, it's God who is behind this. And be assured that when God causes extreme things to happen back then or even today, it's so he can act extremely. God sometimes allows things to happen in our lives that are completely out of our control, just like this was for Daniel, so that God has to act. And then God, and only God, can get the glory. Now, we'll go on. We'll see if he gets the glory in this situation. In verse 10, the astrologers answered the king, "There is not a man on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king," now catch this, "except the gods, and they do not live among men." Now this made the king very angry, very furious. So he ordered the execution of all the wise men in Babylon, not just these guys, every one of them. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. Now, looking at the timeline, Daniel and his friends had just gotten out of their 3-year training program, and it was like their first day in the courts. It's like their first day on the job. And all of a sudden, guys are knocking on their door saying, "We got to kill you." And they're like, "What is going on?" So when Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. And he asked the king's officer, "Why did the king issue such a harsh decree? I mean, good grief, man, it's my first day." Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. And at this, Daniel went to the king and asked for time so that he might interpret the dream for him. So King Nebuchadnezzar has asked the impossible, which the king's magicians and astrologers openly acknowledge. Only the gods can provide an answer for this, and they do not live among men. Well, the real God does dwell with his people, and soon that's going to be shown to be true. But what I really liked about this passage, though it is Daniel's response, when he finds out that he's about to be put to death along with his friends, he doesn't panic. He doesn't freak out. This boy, and remember, he's probably 17 maybe, he knows God. And as Major Ian Thomas said, it is the presence of the Lord Jesus that allows a man to be gloriously detached from the pressure of the circumstance. Daniel seems to be gloriously detached from the pressure of having his life on the line. That's the presence of God. Nothing else can do that. Someone once asked Einstein's wife if she understood the theory of relativity. She replied that she didn't, but that Albert did, and he could be trusted. Well, how much more should we trust God? We may not know what's going on, but God knows, and he can be trusted. Proverbs 3, verses 25 and 26 says, "Do not be afraid of sudden fear, nor of the onslaught of the wicked when it comes, for the Lord will be your confidence and will keep your foot from being caught." You know, fear in a situation is a manifestation of our lack of trust and faith in God. Fear shows that we're not trusting God. In our day, the pressures come from everywhere, more and more every day, it seems like. There's pressure with jobs, health, relationships, family. You know, there's more strain on families and difficulties in rearing children. World financial turmoil, politics, associated anxieties are increasing day by day. Things are getting harder. It's getting harder just to get up and do what we got to do each day. There's a shaking going on so that those things that are unshakable may remain. So are you convinced of the faithfulness of God? Daniel was able to remain calm when the pressure came on because of his close relationship to the Lord. May we be the same. Verses 18 and 19, "Then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon." So during the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. You know, there's nothing like a good old trial to get the prayer life firing through. Daniel's first action is to get on the blower and call for a prayer meeting. He swings straight into action, organizes his three friends to start praying to plead for mercy. There's no doubt that in these days that we live in, we need prayer. We need each other, and we need to be praying for each other. No doubt about it. You need to make sure that you have people around you that you can ask to pray during times of trial. Daniel did. And make sure you take things straight away to the Lord instead of just stewing on them for a while and being afraid. The longer we stew on these things, the more fearful we become. So the Lord answered him and granted the answer to the mystery. And the Bible says that it was revealed during the night. Now, we don't know whether Daniel kept praying till he got an answer or whether he just prayed and then went to sleep and got it. We don't know. But Daniel showed great faith in a very faithful God. And he's a wonderful example to us today. So once he got the answer, he praised God. And verses 19 through 23 are his response to God's answer. It says, "Then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, 'Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He sets up kings and deposes them. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, O God of my fathers. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king." Now, I love how this section concludes with Daniel offering up this wonderful words of praise. You know, imagine how much joy and amazement would have been in his heart at this time towards the Lord who had revealed this mystery and saved them from a certain death. And of course, God gets the glory because only he could show them the answer and spare their lives. God doesn't need anything. He's self-sufficient. So what can we give him? Well, our praise and our lives. Daniel also understood that God gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. Reminds us of what Jesus said, "To him who has, more will be given." If we have the wisdom to know that true knowledge and understanding is given from God, then more wisdom will be added to us because we learn to rely on God and seek his wisdom. It's kind of like a circle thing. Also, I like how Daniel said he reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. Now, obviously, Daniel's thinking about the king's dream that had been revealed to him, but God reveals more than that. He can reveal the reasons concerning the dark times that we're going through today. Job 12:13-23 is a similar passage to Daniel 19-23. Verse 22 of Job 12 says, he reveals the deep things of darkness and brings deep shadows into the light. What we consider times of darkness is still light to the Lord. In this age that we live, the pressure is on. But God knows what lies in the darkness. He knows what's in the dark. And we need to be like Daniel and commit all things unto the one who holds our lives in his hands. He's still the God of the impossible. He still reveals deep and hidden things, and he still gives wisdom and power to those in need. So, as we conclude this lesson, let's explore why God gave this dream. What was the purpose? It was a huge, dramatic event, but God had a purpose in mind for everybody concerned. So, you got to ask yourself, what was the purpose for Nebuchadnezzar? What was the purpose for Daniel? What was the purpose for the wise men? What's the purpose for us today? So the purpose for Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon that had just defeated Israel. The purpose for this king was to remind him that all earthly kingdoms are going to be crushed and smashed. Nothing lasts forever, including his own kingdom. Only the Lord's kingdom is eternal. It was a dream specifically designed to put the fear of God into Nebuchadnezzar's heart. And it seemed to have worked, as we'll see next week. The purpose for Daniel, well, he was a young man exiled in Babylon, along with his friends and fellow Jewish exiles. He stood alone in a society that honored foreign gods, false gods. But through this dream, God was reminding Daniel that he was the one who was in control. He ordained the rise and fall of kingdoms. And even though Daniel and his people were exiled, they would have been encouraged to see the God of Israel firmly in control, even down in Babylon. And we can learn and take heart from that because we live in a society that no longer honors God, but he's in control. How about the wise men and everybody else that was looking in the court? God was showing them who the true God is. He was showing them that all their wisdom, all their little g gods, everything that they placed their hope and their trust and their faith in amounted to diddly squat. They would be shown up by a young Israelite boy whose God, unlike theirs, was alive and active. And finally, what's the purpose for us? Well, this God-given dream that Nebuchadnezzar had accurately listed the world empires that would rise and fall from that day down to the return of Christ. What an amazing God who declares the end from the beginning. Believers can look at this and know that God is in control despite the chaos of world events. They can know that it's all building for the grand finale where the stone cut out with human hands, who is the Lord Jesus, smashes the kingdoms of the world and establishes his own on the planet. Now, today's lesson was a little bit short. It was sort of an introduction to the interpretation of the dream. And so we just needed to get that out of the way. So next week, we will look at the dream and the interpretation, and we will see what Nebuchadnezzar does in light of the interpretation that Daniel gives him. So I hope you all enjoyed this, and I hope you're looking forward to the next lesson. And in the meantime, stay faithful to God, keep praying, realize that God is in control, and I'll say, God bless.